Okay, again, my name is Danita. I always start off saying I'm the oldest of four because my siblings are very important to me. I started foster care at 7. And me and this mic are fighting. It's been moving since I got here. Hopefully it'll stay. My siblings and I was also raised in Detroit. My siblings and I were separated in the first time we came into foster care. We're going to talk about this hopefully a little bit later, looking at the list of questions, but I'm brown to me. My sister is fair, much lighter than I, and both of my brothers, even though we're girl, boy, are both darker than I am. And so my brothers were placed together in one foster home. My sister was placed in a white foster home, and I was placed in another foster home. I was considered a parentified child. I took care of them. I made sure they went to school. I made sure they were dressed. I fed them. I did everything. And so being separated was very, very hard on me. I needed to know what was going on and what were these strangers doing to them. So that was very, very difficult for me, being separated. Plus, I was put in a foster home with a pastor and his wife. Even though my mother was married when she had the 4 children, my parents, if they lived together, I never recall this. And my father was dead when I was 4 and a half, so I really have no real memories of him at all. So this man being in the house was very weird to me, and that this woman was taking orders from him was extremely weird to me. I mean, he made all of the orders and she followed them. I took her to the side and I said, you really don't have to listen to him. You know, you're just supposed to take his money. You're not supposed to, you know. And she tried to talk to me and she said, we discussed things. I said, no, you don't have to discuss things with him. And she's looking at me, the 7-year-old, and they're both trying to have discussions with me, and that was very nice. I mean, my very first foster home was my very best foster home. I didn't know that at the time. But they really tried to work with a 7-year-old and really tried to rationalize with a 7-year-old who was trying to tell them that they were doing things all wrong. No one explained to me, no social worker explained to me why I was placed there. And that summer was just when I was starting to feel like I was part of that home environment. I mean, all they allowed me to do was make my bed. They told me to go outside and play. They actually tried to give me a doll. All those things I never, ever, ever did in my entire life is things they tried to teach me. Just when I was actually starting to learn that, I was pulled out and put back home, where I had to start relearning to do all of the things that I was doing prior to going there. And that set the pattern. Once I started going into foster care and going home, for the next 11 years, that's what would happen. I would go into foster care, go home, go into foster care, go home. I have had over 100 roommates. I've been to over 10 schools. I've been in foster homes, detention facility, not because of my behavior, but because of they didn't have any place else for us to go. I've been to group homes. I've been to DJ Healy, which was a shelter at the time. It was just called DJ Healy when I was there, but I liked DJ Healy at the time I was there because at that point we were able to have all of my siblings there. I could go across the hall. They had a cottage for the girls and a cottage for the boys, so I knew where my siblings were. I knew what was going on with them. No one was molesting them. They were safe. That was okay with me. When we were in foster homes, then that was not always okay. Let me see. Sometimes we were placed with relatives. That also was not always okay. Relatives can be a good thing, but it depends on the relatives. It depends on, there used to be a saying, the apple doesn't always fall far from the tree. Sometimes it's not a good thing to be placed with your relatives because there's a reason why that parent has the problems that they have. I wanted to be with my relatives if my siblings were going to be there. But the reason I left my grandmother's home was because I could not stand to be there anymore. The domestic violence that my mother always seemed to be in the middle of stemmed from the domestic violence that came out of her mother's home. So once I left my grandmother's home, which is where my siblings stayed, was because of the continued domestic violence that was going on in my grandmother's home. However, being in a group home was not that much better. When I was 7, I was responsible for doing the grocery shopping. I was responsible for paying the bills. I was responsible for getting my siblings up and making sure they were dressed and ready for school, helping them with their homework, making sure the house was clean. I was responsible for all of those things. Once I was in the foster homes and the shelters and all of those things, none of those things were under my control. When you're in a shelter or when you're in a foster home or when you're in a residential, then those things are taken care of by somebody else. When I was in care, we didn't have independent living, and no one taught you how to pay bills anymore. So that became another issue. Once I turned 17 and 18, they also didn't discuss preparing for financial aid and going to college. Even though my school was college prep, completely 4 years of science, 4 years of English, and so forth and so on. And yes, I was going to college, or everything was geared for me to go to college. No one prepared me for college. We didn't study, even though that was a requirement for me to be going to that school. You got an hour to study. How many people can prepare for a test and everything with 1 hour study a night, period? That's all I had. No one prepared me for filling out the financial aid forms, and I totally thought work study meant if you worked, that was your money. I totally thought if you worked, that was your money. So when I turned 18 in March, I was ready to leave my group home, which was my last placement, and they said, no, we're going to keep you because we want to have this on our books that we had a successful person, a successful youth graduate from our program. That's pretty much what they told me. So they kept me until June. I graduated from their program, and they said, yay, this is a win in our column. You know, we've had you graduate from our program, and see you later, bye. They gave me $800, which I earned the summer before, and I filled out my own financial aid papers. I had no idea what that meant, but I thought $800 meant I was rich. And I blew it all basically that summer. I went to Eastern and I was going to be staying in the dorms. I had no idea what all this paperwork meant. I just signed it off. No one explained anything to me. And I knew I had work study. I got to the dorms. I found this campus job. And I partied because I had absolutely no structure, none. There was nobody to wake me up anymore. There was nobody to tell me what to do anymore. And you know, freshmen, they give you all of those 8 o'clock classes. I had no one to make me go to those 8 o'clock classes. And no one, I didn't even have that 8 o'clock, I didn't even have that 1 hour of study I had to do anymore. So even though school always was easy for me, it was no longer easy for me anymore. And all of that, oh, I'm poor foster child stuff, wasn't working in college. So my first semester, for the very first time, well, actually the second time, because I did get an F in calculus. for the very first time in my life, I failed in school. And that was humiliating. And I had for the very first time, I had to figure out what I was going to have to do with myself. I went back to Lutheran Social Services, and I said, okay, I failed, so what are you guys going to do for me? They're like, your case is closed, we can't do anything. I said, okay, so what am I supposed to do? I don't know, I guess you got to go to a shelter. So then I went back to what was then called Department of Social Services, now called Department of Human Services. I went to my caseworker. I said, okay, I got kicked out of school. What are you going to do? They said, we can't do anything. Your case is closed. Go to a shelter. So basically, that's one parent that said, we're not going to do anything for you. I went to my mother. She said, well, you know what? You decided to tell on me, so I don't want anything to do with you. I guess you got to go to a shelter. I went to my aunts and my other family. They said, we're not going to help you either. You're out there on your own. I went to other people, family. No one said that they would do anything to assist me. And that's when I realized that I was basically out there on my own. I did not realize how serious the problem was until that moment. That was my first panic attack, that I had to do something differently. I begged my way back into school, put myself on academic probation, got a student loan, and got back into school and changed my way of thinking and started couch surfing until I figured out what I wanted to do 4 years later, basically, and go into social work, and here I am.